Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Steeler Nation, we are back for another great episode on the one and only The Sick Podcast, Steeler Crazy. I am Jay York Football. Next to me, as always, mic'd up Sports One. And man, we are just rolling out the guests. A great variety over here, just breaking down all things Steelers. A lot of optimism going on right now, Mike. How's everything going in South Florida for you?
Everything's good. I'm optimistic about the Steelers, that's for sure. Chance to get to 6-2. They better get to 6-2. A home game
Yeah.
against the New York Giants on Monday Night Football. If you've seen what Daniel Jones is doing lately, you can't let him come into your house on prime time and steal a victory, because that would leave a bad taste in everybody's mouth heading into the bye week. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know why I'm looking at glass half empty, man. I'm pumped. It was a huge win against the Jets.
Mhm.
Back-to-back wins over New York teams will be special. That's for sure.
Take a bite out of that big
The Big
apple, as
Apple, you
they
damn
say.
right.
Yeah. So before I throw it over to you, we know we have great sponsors over here at the Sick Podcast, Steeler Crazy. I'm holding the Manta Sleep Mask right here, the only mask designed and optimized for deepest sleep possible in any environment. We say it all the time. I even went back in the package that I had. They sent earplugs. They have a little mesh bag, carrying bag for travel. Anytime you're on a flight, train, however you get to where you need to be, you need that great sleep. This is what you need to use. And make sure you use our code 6Steelers for 10% off. Again, that's 6Steelers. Manta Sleep. Sleep is so important. Get rejuvenated, rested in any environment. Manta Sleep, 100% blackout for a deeper sleep. Mike?
Yeah, and you're going to sleep really well if you win some money on DraftKings Sportsbook. Whether you call it a TD, a tutty, in for six, touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We don't care how they score them, JY. We just want to bet on touchdowns. Could be a defensive touchdown, uh, whatever it might be, kick return touchdown. DraftKings is your place to be. They're delivering. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player to score a touchdown. Who knows? Maybe Najee Harris gets in the end zone again this Monday night. But go to DraftKings Sportsbook app, make your pick. Very, very important stuff. Use our code SICK-SPORTS. Right there, you see it. New customers, you get 200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball.
All right, let's get it, Shane.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Steelers Crazy.
Harris Smith shields. Flacco Polamalu takes it home. Super Bowl 43. Pittsburgh might be bound for that thanks to number 43.
The sickest Pittsburgh Steelers podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
This next guest is very exciting, like JY mentioned. He's been featured just about everywhere. ESPN, NBC, The Athletic. You can find him at Fantasy Pros. He's a data-driven injury analyst at Sport MD Analysis. It's none other than Deepak Chona. Deepak, how are you, man?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, guys. I'm pumped to check out some Steelers action with you and get going on some of this.
We're excited to chat with you. We were talking off air a little bit about your background, but I want you to tell the folks a little bit more. The classic run-of-the-mill orthopedic surgeon and fantasy football expert.
Yeah, just like you said, just run-of-the-mill injury guy. I think, I started getting into orthopedic surgery as a profession because of an interest in sports injuries, football injuries specifically. And one thing kind of led to another. I got quarantined with COVID and had a little free time, and that's when this all kind of really started. And here we are.
The injury bug is crazy so far this year. At least it feels like. Maybe this happens every year and we're just kind of knee-jerk in the moment a little more so. But does it feel just a little bit different this year in just a general sense?
I think the number of star players, and especially like fantasy football relevant star players, is up. The overall total injury numbers are actually down, though, which is interesting.
Good point.
And those are concussion, lower extremity, all across the board. So the NFL is making progress. It's just an inherently violent game. So I think we've noticed it more, but probably not like a total up overall.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Russell Wilson a little bit. He is the big news in Pittsburgh sports, of course, nationally as well. The quarterback change, and then he comes in, performs really well against the Jets, gets the W. Russell was battling a calf injury, as I'm sure you're aware, throughout training camp, and it essentially held him out for about 5 to 6 weeks there. From your homework, your data, how tough is it for a quarterback to overcome an injury like that? Why did something maybe so minor to the rest of us hold him out for the better part of over a month?
Yeah, it's a big deal with these calf injuries. There's kind of two things. One is, if you remember back to last year when Joe Burrow had his calf injury, he had they called like a minor calf injury, and then it re-aggravated, and that's a really high chance of happening, somewhere around 25% if players come back too fast. And the other part of it is, as a quarterback, you're kind of always backpedaling, so that's all off your calf. When you push off, also very much off your calf. So those little quick steps that you're trying to take, you're constantly engaging the calf muscles, and they're very likely to be restrained as a quarterback. At this point, I would be pretty confident that Russell Wilson is probably behind that re-injury window. So as a Steelers fan, I think you have reason for optimism there.
So another guy that has been experiencing injuries, Jaylen Warren, he suffered a grade 1 PCL sprain week 3. Talk about that, and do you think that will have a lingering impact?
Yeah, so the fortunate part about his injury is that they said it was grade 1, which is they kind of go on a scale of 1 to 3, and that's going to be your least severe. So the overall, you do see a dip in production when players come back, and a lot of that I think has to do with managing re-injury risk. So what you saw with Puka Nacua is probably he had a PCL injury in the preseason or in the training camp, and then when he came back that first couple of weeks, he had the re-injury pretty much right away. That's what you're trying to avoid. So you do see usually a dip, but I would tell you by 6 weeks, you would expect that to be essentially zero. So I would say Jaylen Warren had the hamstring earlier, and then he had the PCL. So that combo is probably why you haven't heard much from him this year. But I do think like second half of the season, he's probably looking upwards.
That's good to hear. Steeler Nation will be happy to hear that, because he was definitely been a workhorse for the running game. Let's talk, before I throw it back over to Mark. Mike, Mark, same thing.
4-letter M word, really.
Yeah.
My parents are not creative.
Alex Highsmith had the groin injury. How easy is something like that to get re-aggravated? I know I'm a personal trainer myself, and I always, now that I'm constantly moving, I always try and do, stretches specific for the groin, hip flexors, that sort of thing. So just talk about, how serious that can be. And again, that seems like it could be a lingering injury.
It very much can. They've held him out a little bit, so that helps kind of lower the re-injury risk on these. It's really just a matter of kind of the more time you get off, the less likely this is to get re-injured. Mm-hmm. And to your point, as these are the types of injuries where you're kind of doing these side to side motions all the time, especially as a lineman. So you see a lot of these kind of groin strains. And as a result, you do typically see a production dip when players return, and that usually lasts about 3 weeks. So it's a little bit harder to quantify that on the defensive side of the ball. There's less player stats to work with, but nonetheless, in most of our data, we see a production dip about 20% for 3 weeks after the return. And then after that, you kind of get back to baseline as long as he avoids re-injury.
Good to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. We are hanging with Deepak Chona, talking a little medical here on the Sick Podcast. Steelers crazy? Want to talk trade deadline. November 5th, right around the corner. And Steelers Nation and us wannabe pundits over here are talking wide receiver, because this team has an absolutely pressing need next to George Pickens for a number 2 option if they want to compete. So I want to start with Cooper Kupp. This is a guy, obviously, who has struggled with some injuries over the last couple of years. When he's healthy, incredibly productive. What are your thoughts in general about Kupp moving forward and maybe his ability to stay healthy?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I caught a little heat in the preseason because I pointed out some yellow flags on Kupp, and those are age over 30. He has a pretty extensive soft tissue history, including a severe hamstring previously. Those types of things really work against him in terms of, like, as you're saying, trying to stay healthy. Now, when he comes back, which is probably tonight, he is likely to be pretty close to his baseline performance. And even if you knock off a 15% production hit from his baseline, that's still like a wide receiver 1 or a high level wide receiver 2. So with that in mind, I think Kupp is going to look very good when he's active here. But to your point, the re-injury risk is really high. And that's kind of unfortunately going to stay with, again, wide receiver over age 30, history of in-season injury. These high ankles have about a 15% re-injury rate. So all of those things work against him. But I do expect, at least in the short term, he's going to be totally viable.
There's a receiver that Steelers fans are less excited about, who is on the trade market. However, anything could ultimately be helpful. They brought this guy in the offseason for an in-person workout. Ultimately, he ended up with the New York Jets. The Jets, of course, traded for Devontae Adams. It doesn't look like they have much of a need for Mike Williams anymore. Guy that is getting older, longer in the tooth, and has a pretty severe injury history. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, he does have a severe injury history. He also has played a lot of games, meaning that, like, despite the injury histories, he's commonly on the report and then plays through things. Now, the thing that has most recently, I think, led to Mike Williams' quiet season is that he's coming off the ACL and he's up there in age for a wide receiver as well. So that kind of combination projected that until about week 10, you were going to see a major dip in his production. The other kind of wild card that's a little hard to totally quantify in his case is the chemistry with Aaron Rodgers for a lot of players. If you go back through the history, is very hit or miss, in the sense that he has his Randall Cobbs and his Jordy Nelsons who he loves, and then everybody else gets very little kind of work. So if Mike Williams comes in, I would expect by about week 12 onwards, he's 90. That's when we project him at 90% of his pre-injury baseline. And that's quite a good player, and definitely one that can contribute, maybe not, lead your fantasy team or lead your Steelers to the playoffs, but I would say definitely a contributor is what I would expect from Mike Williams.
I want to talk about another relevant player in New York, a guy that the Steelers are going to see this Monday night for the first time, and hopefully the only time in 4 years, and that is Malik Neighbors, who returned last Sunday from a concussion, obviously, as you know. What's your outlook on Neighbors the rest of the year? Obviously, a highly productive player, but these guys who suffer concussions early in the season, talk me through generally what that kind of looks like the rest of the year in terms of how the team and the medical and the doctors are looking at him.
Yeah, to be honest, I actually feel pretty good about Neighbors in terms of, I would say every player is at somewhat of an injury risk, right? Because it's the NFL. But relative to the sort of peer group, I would say Neighbors is actually pretty promising. He doesn't have a significant real injury history. And to my knowledge, that was his first documented concussion. And that's kind of the key with these concussions, is the effect is probably cumulative for the long term. And most likely, we think the more concussions you have, the lower threshold you have to have another one. So with those kind of things in mind, keeping that it's his first one, he missed a little extra time compared to normal, but not severely. So I would say that combo makes me just about as confident in him staying healthy as any other wide receiver. Once these players come back from concussion, they're not necessarily getting any different treatment. And the reason is that the concussion protocol is kind of very graduated, very slow and graduated. So they're kind of dipping their toe in the water, seeing, are you having any symptoms or issues, and then letting them progress from there. So once they clear and play even, then you kind of expect them to be basically at baseline. And the guys that I worry about are the ones who've had 3, 4, or 5 concussions. Those are going to be your, like, Tua Tagovailoa, for example. Mm-hmm. But first concussion, I would say relatively low cumulative risk.
He said he's not wearing the Guardian cap I've seen.
Yeah, I was a little surprised to see
that. What do you think about those? That's a good kind of.
Yeah, I think there's limited sort of like clinical data, so to speak, meaning that we just haven't had them long enough to say, like, this is over 5 years, we have a 15% reduction or something of that nature. The science and the people who are designing these seem, kind of to have it together. And from that standpoint, if you're absorbing impact, and the data that I've seen does suggest that these Guardian caps absorb impact, I don't really understand why one would not wear it, but I also have never tried it on, and I don't know how like bulky or uncomfortable it is.
Like, I want to say, does James Daniels wear? I think he wears one.
Yeah, Steelers James Daniels, he's out for the rest of the season, unfortunately, but he was wearing one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just don't see them often, and unfortunately, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that you kind of look like Mega Man a little bit. They
Yeah.
look a little funky, right? Which hopefully is a
Totally.
barrier these guys get over eventually.
Yeah, especially, you're talking about cumulative head impact. And in my eyes, that's something over the course of a career. If you're decreasing that by even like 20% per hit, that's huge. So I'm with you. And I think and hope that that's the trend we're going to see over time. But, their focus is in the right place, I would say.
Good. Hey, before we get you out of here, just tell us what you got coming up next and where everyone can find you at as well.
Totally. Well, I'm kind of all over social media right now, mostly Twitter at SportMD Analysis, Instagram and YouTube at SportsMed Analytics. And if you ever want to check out, run through some injury updates, you can often find me on Fantasy Pros a couple times a week, and then at sportsmedanalytics.com as well. So we're going to be continuing to crank on these injury reports, and especially tonight's game alone has TJ Hawkinson, Puka, and Cooper Kupp all kind of making headlines. So we'll be active and fielding any questions at any time. So y'all let us know.
Yeah. So here, before I get you out of here, so I have Malik Neighbors, so that was good to hear about that. I know this is a Steelers podcast, but we're talking strictly fantasy here. So I have Puka. I just activated him off the IR, and everyone's telling me not to start him because it's going to be like a production night. But then when you have someone sitting on your bench, that's when they go off. What would you do? Is it would you say it's a coin flip whether, or just specifically tonight?
Yeah, specifically tonight, it's so dicey. I have a league where I have Cooper Kupp, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. I'm keeping Puka on my bench.
Yeah.
But where I have
so that makes me feel better.
Wide receiver 3 range is kind of what I would expect. I think there's a high risk here of boomer bust type performance.
Yeah, well, that's good. And something I wanted to get in, another quarterback, Steelers quarterback, Russell Wilson. I just picked him up off of waivers. Where do you see his fantasy value at if he continues to be QB1 and progresses?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't have any significant sort of injury reason to fade him. And I would tell you, in terms of the way the offense looked, if you take out that first quarter where they were probably a little rusty,
you had to shake off the rust.
And after that, he looked pretty good. So
no pun intended there, by the way.
Right, I was thinking the same thing. But yeah, he has no reason in my eyes. I have Fields in a best ball, so I'm kind of not thrilled about it. But I do think he's gonna take over from here.
Hey, give me the take off the medical analysis hat. Let's talk your team real quick. The Texans. Steeler fans aren't going to hate you for that. No real rivalry. No. You guys kicked our ass last year, but we'll put that past you. You're not Ravens, Browns, Bengals, but how you feeling? Stroud struggled a little bit last week on offense, but you guys are still playing well.
Yeah, so that's the thing. We keep stacking the W's. That's all that matters, right? But at the end of the day, do I want to see Stroud have 95 yards? Like, that's pretty rough. No, I think we're going to put it together. I think Mixon is really the key to all of this. So when he's healthy and our O-line's healthy, I think we're going to run the ball on most teams. The guys I worry about are, of course, the Chiefs, just like everybody else.
Yeah, so got to get through the Chiefs.
With Nico Collins out, though, our passing game didn't look good at all. So I kind of hope that we switch a little bit more towards a pass heavy. You have the weapons to do it. But as long as Joe Mixon's putting up like 4.5 yards a carry, I can't argue with that either. So I'm just hoping we stay in the core healthy by the time we get to the playoffs, and then it's anybody's ball game.
I streamed Tank Dell in DFS this past Sunday, and that was pretty painful. Although the rest
pretty painful, but I would tell you, dropped a touchdown that kind of hit him in the chest. So there's definitely targets there. There's opportunity.
Hey, look out for this. Just an early prediction I'm going to throw at you. You'll remember this, okay? So I think the division winners probably going to have Baltimore, Kansas City, Buffalo. I think the Texans probably will be that 4th. And then Pittsburgh, that number 1 wild card. So you know what that could mean.
There you
go. Round 1, we'll revisit. You could have some Texans Steelers.
We'll bring you back on for that one.
That would what
Yeah.
it would be right now, I think. So yeah.
Yeah, and that would be in my backyard over here. So y'all let me know if
Sure
you make
thing.
it down to Houston for it.
Sounds good.
Ah,
We'll
it
get the
sounds
plane
good.
ticket. Hey, man,
Tailgate food is on you.
Yeah, absolutely.
it's been great. Thank you for
Thanks
your
so
time.
much, man.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
No, this was great. But we'll be in touch soon, I'm sure.
Thank you
All
so
right,
much.
take
Really
care.
enjoyed it. Yeah,
Well,
man. I mean, listen, it's good to not have too many injuries to talk about with the Steelers, right? When the conversation is about Russell Wilson being most likely past his injury, Jalen Warren on the mend, and mostly good news for
Highsmith,
Alex
yeah.
Highsmith. I know the
Well, I
one guy
know
we didn't get
groin
to was
injuries linger,
yeah,
so
they
that
can
was
linger.
good there. That's like the biggest thing, like with those type of injuries, and especially being a professional football player, the movement. I mean, you're
Yeah.
constantly just being put in awkward positions, and it's a violent game.
The one guy I didn't get to was Roman Wilson, and I know a lot of
Yeah,
Steelers
I
fans are
didn't.
curious about him. He's got a high ankle sprain. Apparently, he re-aggravated it.
Yeah,
He's
and then
had some foot
Tomlin said
problems.
that. I was like, he didn't get.
Some says he's got to work harder for him. There's some weird stuff going on there. I'm really not sure. Steelers
It's
haven't been
kind of
shy to
like
play rookies
the
recently, and he's not playing.
maybe not similar, but doesn't it kind of remind you of like the Calvin Austin's first year where like he was injured and
He was
then he
banged
like
up.
disappeared, and I'm like, what the hell happened to this guy?
Yeah, that's
And
fair. I don't
then
know if it's like
then
the
he
old Steeler
resurfaced.
way. Like you have to, you got to earn your stripes. Like Ohio State, you got to earn your,
I guess.
with flair or whatever they put on the helmet over there. But I mean, if you're good enough to play and you have a struggling wide receiver group, you play the guy
Yeah.
if he's
Yeah, that
healthy.
doesn't.
So either he hasn't been healthy or obviously he hasn't shown much in practice to, get on the field, and that's kind of sucks.
Yeah, so I guess now is time to give our predictions for primetime games. So again, I know that the Cowboys got us in primetime. A lot of primetime games past my bedtime. This is past my bedtime. I'm calling you Mark. So I'm going to take the Steelers. I just think it's going to be another blowout. I honestly do. I think the defense shows up. I'm going to say, call me crazy. Steelers Crazy Podcast, 31 to 10 Steelers. I think Russ goes off again. I think he gets another, I would say maybe he'll have 3 passing touchdowns and George Pickens will have 2 touchdowns, maybe get one to Muth. I don't know. But I just think that there's the Giants. I mean, Daniel Jones. I mean, nothing is going to top the Deshaun Watson contract. That's the worst contract in all of sports, not just the NFL. But Daniel Jones is just underperformed.
He's a turd sandwich.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like in these what I never understood about, they give these quarterbacks and then as soon as they get these contracts, they just shit the bed. I'm just like, it's like, okay, give me my money and then I'm gonna forget. Yeah, but it's
especially
like,
in New York. But
yeah,
but it was a bad contract. I mean, let's
either way
be honest. Yeah.
Either way. But yeah, 31-10 Steelers, 6-2, riding into the bye week.
I can't believe what I witnessed the last 2 games. A Pittsburgh Steelers offense score over 30 points back-to-back weeks, blow out 2 teams back-to-back weeks. So I'm going to be hard-pressed to believe it can happen a third time in a row, even though the Giants stink. I'm going to go 23-17 Steelers, but that score is going to be closer than the actual game. I think they'll be leading like 23-10 throughout.
Yeah.
Giants maybe get a garbage touchdown at the end, and that tricky Vegas spread. I think it's 6.5 right now. So it always finds a way generally to get close, even though it didn't the last few games. So Steelers are gonna cruise. You won't have much anxiety, but I'll go with a final of around 23-17.
That's close, but I know that those garbage touchdowns, it always it's funny because like, you look at the bottom line on SportsCenter, ESPN, and it's like all those games are like, and you're like, wasn't this a blowout? And then team will score like 10 points, 14 points, and it doesn't even matter.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, that was a great show. I really do enjoy like that we're able to have like national guests on and just so many like different sectors of sports and football, because that's what we try and do here, a little bit of variety. We just had we just had Christian Kuntz on.
How many shows do you think have a long snapper and an orthopedic surgeon on in the same week?
Probably none. I'm gonna go with none. I think that if we got that award locked up.
No doubt. I think
but
it'll probably be the first time and the last time it happened.
Man,
week for
this is a late week for me. I'm not gonna lie. So it's past my bedtime. I wake up pretty early, but I don't need the Manta sleep. It's dark here now, but definitely when I travel. So and shout out to DraftKings as well.
For sure.
And we're just gonna keep rocking and rolling. We got a lot of great guests on. I know we're gonna have Deshaun Elliott back on. He's my brother. Randomly texted me. I sent you that text, and he was like, this is all he said. Deshaun Elliott leads the Steelers in tackles, and I just said, "Yep." I said it was all God's plan.
Credit to us. We're the reason why.
So thank you guys again, as always, for hanging out with us. We're gonna keep cranking out the great guests, players, and hopefully the Steelers get the win. Actually, we're going to manifest that the Steelers are going to get the win, go to 6-2. Ooh. It's funny, Mike, because I was talking with someone about the Steelers and they go, man, the Steelers really could be 8-0. I said, just be happy. Everyone always wants to nitpick everything. Like the Chiefs lost a game. I would rather lose a game because it gives me anxiety, kind of like what Pitt's going through right now. They're 6-0, they play, and it's just like, oh my gosh, it's like just
enjoy the moment.
Exactly. Stop trying to dissect everything.
Yeah, people are unhappy all the time. You could play that game in multiple ways. That's the thing people always forget. They could have beat the Cowboys if they get a stop in the last second, but who also knows if Justin Herbert doesn't get hurt in the Chargers game?
Yeah.
I mean, do they win that game? I'm not 100% sure, probably, but things could have been different. There's just so many little variables at the end of the day. Yeah. Here's the saying. You are what your record says you are. At the end of the day, that's it.
We'll end on this. Remember that shirt, 15-1. Any questions?
Any questions?
Can't do it, but hey, we can get damn close. All right, Steeler Nation, it's been great. We'll see you next week. Make sure that you subscribe and keep on rocking and rolling in the free roll. Jay York Football, Mic'd Up Sports 1. It's
Mark
bedtime.
Is out.
See you, Mark.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Steelers Crazy on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.